rat lungworm is not going to go away. We're going to have this problem for a long time. As long as we have snails and rats around, we're going to have the disease. So I see this as a time when we need to step up and institutionalize in our department the ability to respond to outbreaks or individual cases even, and to try to find out what the source of infection was and chase those down. We do a pretty good job. We have epidemiologists and others on all the islands who can go out and do the investigations, but there's not really the leadership and the direction that we should have. In my mind, this is a very serious problem and something that needs more focus than we're giving it now.
If you consider this to be so serious and so necessary, how come the department hasn't come back year after year to say we need this to address these issues, which are ag-related, but really the health department issue, and going through the health department?
Yeah, well,
and you know, the last case that's just been announced about rat lung infection, nobody's been able to determine how the person got it.
That's usually the case, and it's hard to find the source of the parasite that causes the disease. I can only say that I think we had funding up to this year that you provided since I've been here, and actually, $1 million is not an insignificant amount of money. We had $500,000 for 2 years. That money expired this year. Maybe it was an oversight on our part not to have asked for it. We actually did support the position as it was requested in one of the bills last year. So my testimony today is consistent with what essentially I said last year. In any event, we do support the position, and I appreciate the committee's recognizing that this is a need for our departments. And I would say it's both health and ag. There are certainly agricultural benefits to be had from having someone to effectively deal with these diseases.
Okay, when it comes to ratworm disease, it should be a medical doctor who's going to more or less address that. But when it comes to veterinarian, to come up with a permanent position, you have a hard time finding it. Instead, you might have about 100 or 200 veterinarians statewide. So when it's needed, you can sign a contract with them to do the job.
Yeah. Again,
we might even be saving money by doing that.
That's a great example, Dr. Kushola. So the doctor in the hospital who sees the patient come into the emergency room with eosinophilic meningitis, is acutely ill, is going to treat that patient. They can't go out and find out how that patient was exposed. That is, whether they were eating lettuce that had slugs and snails on it, or they were eating we had a big outbreak, you may recall, they made some kava, and the slugs got into the kava, and we had 6 or 7 cases. So the doctor will see the individual case, just like a veterinarian sees an animal, and they'll treat that person, but they can't go out and try to find what the source is and do anything about that. That's where the public health veterinarian comes in. They can get the vector control guys to go out and say, hey, look, there's a huge rat problem on this farm. You need to get on it, and you can't spread your feed on the sides of the ponds, and you need to get into a much more aggressive animal control program. That's what the public health veterinarian does, and it's different than the clinician. Anyway, there is a distinction between that kind of thing, and that's where this value comes in.
Yeah, just consider that proposal, okay? You might even be saving a lot of money. Thank you.
Bruce, you talked a lot about the rat lungworm and the funding mechanism behind it. Wasn't it the public ed request that if they just cleaned up their area, we wouldn't be dealing with so much rat lungworm? Just yes or no?
Yes. Well, if you get rid of all the slugs and rats, you're going to have no problem with transmission. The reality is it's almost impossible to get rid of all the slugs and snails in most situations.
What I was trying to get at was if they would clean their areas, the grasses and the overgrowth and the rubbish, that we would have alleviated a lot of the problems. and that if they just wash their vegetables. Wasn't that like something simple?
Those are the solutions, and most typically when we have a problem with a particular farmer, that's what we recommend is get rid of as many of the rats and slugs as you can, and of course wash your vegetables, and there's not much else you can do.
I think it wasn't just directed at a farmer, it was just an individual in general that had a backyard garden that had just way too much rubbish there.
The backyard farmer, same thing.
Just good practices,
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
Sure, I have a follow-up for department. Okay, so you're saying it's almost impossible to get rid of them, but we require farmers to get rid of fire ants and coqui frogs on their farms, create buffer zones on their farms. They're regularly inspected to ensure that there are no fire ants, that there are no coqui frogs. We cannot do that for slugs.
Well, you need to talk to some of the commercial farmers. I happen to have a large private garden. I'm meticulous about keeping plants away. I set traps out for rats. I do catch some rats, and I still see occasional slug here and there. So I think you can do a lot to minimize. I do.
Yeah.
I put pellets out.
And we occasionally get fire ants, but because we have regular inspections.
Yeah. I think you can minimize the problem a lot through just good hygiene and all the things you're talking about. But the reality
is... That's not required.
It's not required. As far as I know, it's good practice, and most people try to follow good practices. But again, I have to say it's almost impossible to eliminate slugs and snails. Even if you're regularly treating for them and keeping everything trimmed and clear, you're still going to have some issues on occasion. But you can do a lot to bring the numbers down to a very small number. And again, as Rep. quite pointed out, washing your vegetables is key, and just to be sure that you got them all. The semi-slug that's causing so many of the problems is a tiny little thing. It's the size of a grain of rice. You can't really see it. Imagine picking a piece of kale up and looking for a little dark piece of rice on it. They can get in little crevices and cracks, so it's really hard to clean vegetables thoroughly. But that's the only thing we can really do. There's Sue Jarvie and others who we've hired with the funding you provided are looking for ways you can treat the vegetables. You put them in chemical baths or whatever, and they haven't really found a very good, effective way of doing it yet. So they're working on that.
So, of the cases that you are aware of, how many are farm related?
That's a good question. I would say most of them are from backyard activities. The number of, when you say farm, the number of cases we have that are associated with a commercial product sold on the shelves is very small. We do get them occasionally, and of course then we confiscate the crop and and of course everything that's on the shelf from that area if we know where it came from. But most of the problems we have are not with the commercial growers.
So this is an after the fact process. After there's an infection, if you find out it came from a farm, then you go to the farm.
Right. Like most diseases, say you ingest a slug or snail, it's going to be a week, 10 days, even longer, sometimes a couple of weeks before you start exhibiting symptoms, and then you're in the hospital. They have to do a spinal tap. They have to look for the eosinophils in the spinal fluid to confirm it's rat lungworm, and then only then do they report it to us. So we're 2 weeks later at the earliest, and then we go back to try to find out where the person said they ate some vegetables 2 weeks ago, if they can remember, which is usually the case, and then we go out there and then we try to find out whether there's a problem on the farm. And again, most of the time it's someone who has been growing vegetables in their backyard or in their a small plot somewhere near their house and just got careless and
but you would agree that the commercial enterprises have the greatest potential to infect a larger group of people left untreated or unchecked?
Oh, yeah, of course there's more product being put out by them. More people are potentially eating that. But on the other hand, the commercial growers are acutely aware of this problem. And they're plowing fields of lettuce under in Waimea and other places I know, just simply because people aren't eating fresh vegetables because of the fear of of being exposed to rat lungworm. So the farmers who are operating today are really, I think, acutely aware of the issue and doing whatever they can to try to address the issue. But then you hear a story in the paper about someone who ate a head of lettuce and got rat lungworm, and of course everyone's scared of lettuce. So
Well, because people don't know where it came from.
exactly,
Right.
Yeah, most people don't know. When you buy it, you don't even know it came from the mainland or produced locally. Most of it go to Safeway or someplace. I don't. I can't see on the label where it's produced. A lot of people go to Costco because they figure it's been imported. That's kind of a weird way to go, but that's the truth. That they're not. Costco doesn't sell many fresh vegetables, but they'll buy prepackaged stuff, and just because they assume it's coming from somewhere else where they don't have rat lungworm.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, that's
Real quick. So what do you guys do in the last incident that they had the rat lungworm? Because so now that the person, I guess, ate half of it, and how you guys help them after that? Is it an educational process again about cleaning it, and then is it the disclosure of where it came from after? Does it go public on?
If we know, if you may have noticed, we put out the last release on the case on Kauai, and when our releases, if we can find out or we have some clues to where the person was exposed. Remember, they're trying to remember 2 weeks ago that they ate and so forth. So it's hard. But if we know, so that when we had that cluster of cases that drank the kava, that was actually unusual. We had 5 or 6 people come ill after drinking kava that had the slug in it, or slugs, and there we were able, of course, find the problem, and it's easy to take care of. You just don't do that anymore. But in most cases, we really don't know what the problem, where the source of infection was. Many of these people do have backyard gardens, and of course, we will educate them and tell them, you got to be really careful about taking care of your slugs and snails and keeping the rats away and all the things you've talked about. That's about all we can do at this point.
I thought your last case was in Big Island.
You may have a press release on your desk when you get back. I think the last one, I think was just last week, was a case that was confirmed on Kauai. Most of the cases are on the Big Island. Actually, the reason we put out the one on Kauai is that we do this with every case. You're hearing about every one of them because it's an opportunity for us to bring attention to the issue again. It's free advertising, basically. But most of the cases, I think over 80% of the cases we've had are on the Big Island, and most of those on Hamakua and the windward side of the island.
Thank you, Chair.